Welcome, everybody, to the Core 4 Sports Show. On this show, we're going to cover the four most popular sports, in my opinion: football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. Admittedly, I am still learning about hockey as I've just really been into it over the past year or so. So that's one sport that's probably going to be covered the least, but I can hope to continue to learn more and more about it and cover it more as I go on. But with football just right around the corner, we're going to be talking about a lot of college football today. We're going to break down Ohio State versus Texas and then also get into some NFL stuff. So, jumping right into it, breaking down the Big Ten. The Big Ten has kind of been in that odd space for the last couple of years, maybe decade, even really, where they have a tier one that consists of anywhere of 2 to 4 teams. And then after that, there is no tier two. And then tier three is just flooded with a bunch of teams along. And then there's like 2 or 3 teams down in tier four that just are nowhere on the map as far as, competing to even win a game almost. Like Purdue last year, 0-9 in conference play, I think they were, and they were like 1-11 overall. That kind of sort of thing. This year, I think, and I think that changed last year. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming, but last year, I think when you got to the end of that year, I think your tier one in the Big Ten was Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and then that tier two was Michigan and Indiana and an Illinois, and Indiana especially just came out of sorry. Indiana especially just kind of came out of nowhere. And then, Illinois has been up before, not quite as high as they got last year, but Illinois has gotten up there a little bit over the last couple of years, but they had a down year the year before. So we were kind of all wondering, are they going to bounce back, or was that kind of like just a 1 or 2 year hit wonder, and now they're just going to slide back into mediocrity or below? Well, they bounced back, and I think it's going to be a lot like it was last year. I think your tier one of the Big Ten is Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon. And then that tier two is going to be a Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, and then a Nebraska. And then tier three is going to consist of just a ton of teams: USC, UCLA, Michigan State, Minnesota, all those teams. And then there's that tier four of probably like Northwestern and Purdue. Picking the favorite to win the Big Ten, I feel like, is so hard to do this year, because I feel like from a talent perspective, if you're just going off paper, talent wise, I still feel like maybe Ohio State actually has the edge talent wise, especially. And then when you go to experience, Penn State's returning a lot of their whole team, which is what a lot of people which is why a lot of people are making them the favorite to win the Big Ten. But again, that team hasn't accomplished anything. They have not won a big game together. Penn State beat Ohio State one time in 2016, and that's been it. So yes, you have a lot of this returning talent, but that returning talent hasn't accomplished anything, and they've been there already for 3 or 4 years. And it's one of those things we're just going to expect, oh, they have another year under their belt, so they'll automatically just be better and go on that run. I'm not one of those people that just fall for that idea. Like, oh yeah, one more year, you've automatically gotten 20% better, and now you're just going to run through everybody. Ohio State last year, Ohio State was 10-2 at the end of the regular season with another loss to Michigan. They lost to Oregon, but they didn't exactly look like world beaters there towards the end of the year. And then when they got to the playoff, they finally turned it on and showed what they could be. But that's to make the point that just because everyone's coming back doesn't make them all of a sudden be 20-30% better. And now we're just they're all like all universe type of players. So it's just really hard to pick that favorite. Oregon's going to be loaded with talent, as it has been now. They're not a rebuild team anymore where they need a year or two to put everything back together. They're in that Ohio State, that Penn State realm of they're just going to reload. They're just going to reload. They got Dante Moore now coming in at quarterback. They went out and got him the same year. They got Dylan Gabriel, and Dante Moore voluntarily sat a year to get out of UCLA. He voluntarily sat a year because he knew, when they went and got Dylan Gabriel, they knew he was going to be the starter, and Dante Moore, I'm sure, knew that. So that's what I mean when I say he voluntarily just sat out a year and backed up Dylan Gabriel. to be able to go to a better program and be better coached and have more, weapons around him to help him perform better than what he was getting at UCLA, which, I don't know if UCLA really cares all that. I really didn't know if UCLA cared all that much about football until they decided to go out and, get Nico Amaliava, which I'm sure was not cheap. I not in a million years did I see that move coming. So Oregon's just reloading at this point. I think that tier 2 is going to be the same. I think Michigan's going to be in there. I almost put them tier 1, but because Bryce Underwood is a true freshman and I don't love the weapons around, like I'm very unsure about the weapons around him. So because of that, and because he's a true freshman, he's, from what we've seen, high school film, all that stuff, he's got all the talent and the potential in the world. We could all be sitting here 3 weeks from now, and it could be that Trevor Lawrence effect where we're all sitting here 3 weeks from now and it's like, oh no, he's going to compete to win the Heisman this year. So that could easily happen. And then we're sitting here 3 years from now and we're going, God, can we just get this guy out of college football? Because nobody can win and beat Michigan until he's gone, so that could happen, but that's so rare. So I'm going to rely on the side of caution with that and say, I'm going to expect him to have some bumps and lumps and learn this year. And, I think Michigan's year this year is going to look very similar to their year last year, where they maybe don't have the hottest start, but they continue to build and build, and Bryce continues to get better and better and make better decisions. And then towards the end of the year, you're kind of looking at them like, oh yeah, they're building. There's some steam there, and they could go beat Ohio State again. I mean, no one in the world expected them to beat Ohio State last year, and they did it. I think that Ohio State-Michigan game has gotten to the point where it's inverted. There was at one point was you did not believe Michigan could beat Ohio State. You were not going to even think that Michigan was ever going to beat Ohio State again until Michigan actually did it. Well, now I think we flipped. Now it's gotten to that point where, I'm not going to expect Ohio State to win that game until they do. That's where I'm at this point. I'm not going to walk into any Ohio State. I don't care if the entire team gets hurt this year for Michigan. Going in that Ohio State-Michigan game, I'll be sitting there going, nah, yeah, I'm not going to trust Ohio State to win this game until that thing reads 0 and their score is higher than Michigan's. That's where I'm at with that. So I think Michigan will be in that tier 2. Indiana, Illinois, very similar to Penn State as far as how they're doing this, bringing a lot of their team back, bringing a lot of their coaches back, a lot of the same guys in that building, and those are teams that had success last year. So I'm expecting them to still have some success this year. Maybe not quite as much as they did last year because, now they're not going to sneak up on anybody at this point, and put it that way. So maybe, Indiana, instead of that, I think there was 11-2, they dropped to like a 9-4, 9-3, something like that. But that's still a tier 2 team in the Big Ten. So, and that's good for the Big Ten. For so long, it's been, whoever tier 1 was, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, maybe. And then the rest of the Big Ten either just ate themselves or they were just simply a red carpet for Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State to just walk on over, So it's good for the Big Ten now that they have I think personally that they have a tier 2 now, and it may not last. This could be the last year, and then Indiana and Illinois could be back to where they were before. But it's nice for the Big Ten to actually have what I believe will be a tier 2 spot there in their conference with teams who probably can't win the Big Ten this year, but if an Ohio State or a Penn State or an Oregon walk into their house and they're not ready to play, we could be sitting in the middle of the third quarter and all of a sudden Illinois is up 21-14 on Ohio State and you're going, oh boy, here comes chaos. That could easily happen. Nebraska standpoint, Nebraska's in this very weird spot where it's like half the people seem to be really high on them and half the people think, they're going to continue to build and go up and get better. And then the other half are like, I don't know. It's like they're that initial shine to getting Dylan Raiola and Matt Rule has worn off. I don't understand why. Dylan Raiola, I know he wasn't a Heisman contender or anything like that this year, but he was a true freshman last year. He's got all the talent and the potential in the world. I don't see why you would lose any like belief in him. Now, if he has the same kind of year he had last year, this year, and he does that again, then you're like, oh, maybe this guy doesn't quite have that next level type talent like we thought, and he's just kind of good, but he's not Heisman contender, first round NFL draft type guy. He's not that dude. But and I say that because when you listen to the experts on ESPN and Fox and you read articles and stuff like that, they're all really high on Nebraska and Dylan Raiola's talent and Matt Rule's coaching ability. But then when you go look at their odds, I know for one, their over under on wins this year is 7.5, and you're like, really, 7.5? That's all you're kind of like. That's all the expectation you're really going to put on them. So it's that weird spot where like some people seem to believe that they could be capable of certain things, and then some are like, yeah, but it's Nebraska, and I think that is kind of like they're almost like brainwashed or engineered to not believe in Nebraska, because for so long I think we've wanted Nebraska to be back because it has such a great history in college football, but over and over they've kind of let us down and come up short, and I don't think they've performed anywhere near to the expectation we thought they were going to perform when they joined the Big Ten and be one of those like world beaters like Ohio State and like Oregon and Penn State and so forth. So I think some people are now kind of engineered just not to believe in them whatsoever. I understand that, but at the same time, you can't deny that they are continuing to get better every year. They're continuing to bring in more talent than they have in a while, and they have a coach in Matt Rule who has proven to be able to rebuild programs and turn them into good quality teams. And then when you get to that tier 3, that tier 3 is filled with just a lot of teams. There's USC. Like, what is USC? I don't even know what USC is. It's a revolving door quarterback ever since Caleb Williams has been gone. He's only been gone a year, but Miller Moss last year, and then I know they brought in the freshman guy to replace him. I'm forgetting his name all of a sudden, but I'm not sure that I really trust what's going on right there at USC. They seem to just be spinning their wheels. They seem to just be kind of just floating in space and time and not making any real improvement. I know their defense got better last year. Hopefully it gets better again. But I think I'm kind of in that spot with USC where like, okay, you need to make a jump now, because I think a lot of people wanted that to happen last year. A lot of people wanted that defense to be improved. They were expecting Miller Moss to come in there and be great, and he just kind of wasn't. And we were expecting that to be an offensive-led team with a better defense, and there was no way to go but up. But they expected it to be a better defense and them to go. And again, not win the Big Ten, but to compete in some of these games. And they just didn't really. And I'm kind of at that point where like, okay, now you have to. For USC and Lincoln Riley, your back is against the wall. It has to be this year. You have got to show improvement and, this upwards direction towards where you were your first year there with Caleb Williams, where you came that close to making the playoff. If they win that game against Utah, they get into the playoff. So they got to get headed back towards that direction. Do they need to get there this year? No, but you have to show that you're going that way, And then you've got a team like Wisconsin. They're the same for me. I don't know what that program is. Historically, Wisconsin is a kind of run offense team with a good defense. Wisconsin, in my mind, does not have a great history of producing quarterback talent, but they've had great running backs come through there, like Melvin Gordon Jr. But since Luke Fickell's got there, and it surprises me. When I heard Wisconsin was going to get Luke Fickell, I really expected that program to be rebuilt. And we're entering year 3, I think, now with Luke Fickell, and I don't even know what that team is. Are they going to be like are they a pass team first? Are they a run team first? What direction are they, or what direction are they headed? And I have no idea, which is kind of crazy with how well he rebuilt Cincinnati. So like USC, I'm kind of in that same boat with Wisconsin, where they're just kind of spinning their wheels, floating in space and time. And if you're Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, got to show improvement this year. Got to show improvement this year. You've got to start showing that you're headed that upward direction, that you're getting better. Or I'm not saying he's going to get fired, but I think if they have another year like they have the past 2 years, it's going to be now, now you're on the hot seat. And now everybody's just uncomfortable. But sometimes, you're at your best when you're uncomfortable. Sometimes that forces you to do certain things that you didn't want to do before. So that might actually make it better. But I don't know. But that's where I'm at with Wisconsin. I almost want to say a team I want to watch, but more specifically, a player I want to watch, UCLA and / Nico Amaliava. Look, UCLA, have not had a great run of it on the football department over the past couple of years. They have not shown a lot of commitment towards that football program. Chip Kelly left for a reason. He was getting asked to do things that he didn't want to do. He doesn't want to be involved in transfer portal and NIL and all that stuff. But on top of that, they were going to make him do all that stuff, but they don't have resources like that. From when I watch things like Rich Eisen and other guys, and you read certain things, you're getting this feeling that they have some of like the worst football resources and least commitment towards football in the Big Ten, one of the worst. And so when they went out and got a guy like a Nico Amaliava last year in the transfer portal, that flat out shocked me. Not when I heard he was leaving Tennessee, which I thought was bullcrap, but when he decided he was leaving Tennessee, I didn't really think about a team in mind specifically, but you're thinking of the upper echelon, and some Tennessee fans are trying to I think they're trying to talk themselves into it's not that big of a loss because he didn't have an all-world year last year, and I'm going to say the same thing about him I said about Dylan Raiola. He was a true freshman, and that true freshman got you to the playoff. Just imagine what a second and a third year under Josh Heupel could do. So any Tennessee fan who's not saying that's not a major loss, I think is just trying to kid themselves. Not that I think Josh Heupel was wrong for what he did. I loved what Josh Heupel did. I love that he did not give in. I love that he set standards and says, no, this is what we're doing. Take it, leave it. I love how he did not pander. I loved how he stayed in control of that situation and he did not let it get away from him. I love that. And along with Josh Heupel, and I'm sure like the general manager of the team and the football program and stuff like that. But I loved that. But again, when Nico said he was leaving, you expected an Alabama. With Jalen Milroe leaving in Alabama. Well, maybe not Clemson because of Cade, but you get what I'm saying. That kind of upper echelon team. And then he went to UCLA, which, a lot of people are probably going to think it was a money grab. Although I don't know exactly what UCLA paid him, but I'm sure he, this whole thing was about money, him leaving Tennessee from the very start. So I'm sure it was a money grab. But so I wasn't shocked that Nico took it. I was more shocked of where it came from. Again, after what I just said about UCLA possibly committing the least and worst amount of resources towards their football program among some teams in the whole Big Ten, for them to go out and get Nico, that's like an eyebrow raiser. That's wait, what? They went out and did what? They went and got that guy? Okay. But you still don't really know what UCLA is. They don't have a lot of upper echelon talent. I think it's going to be a lot of asking Nico to be hero. A lot of what Dante Moore was going to be asked to do, I think. I think a lot of it's going to be Nico play hero ball and just get us wins. Like Caleb Williams at UCLA, not so much during that first year, but that second year. I'm interested to see what happens there. If if he builds off what he did last year and somehow, unlocks another phase of his game and makes a huge jump, not just a small jump. A small jump won't do it. A small jump won't get them to being a good team, I don't think even. But if he makes a big jump, a huge jump from, here to here and just takes us all by storm, and, he's that Joe Burrow, type guy where he makes the team better. He carries the team. Then you could be talking about UCLA being like a tier 2 Big Ten team this year. You could be talking about them that 8-4. You could talk about them, I'm not looking at their schedule right now, but you could talk about them going into a Michigan and coming out with a win, or going to Indiana, Illinois, coming out with a win, or going, I know they play Ohio State this year, or going to Ohio, and I think Ohio State comes to them, or like having an Ohio State come to you with a new quarterback, and you never know. If that stuff, what I talked about happens and he makes that big jump, maybe you're up 21-14 in the middle of the third quarter and Nico's playing like a Heisman contender, and you're like, oh, okay, now they just need to get weapons around him, and this could actually really be something because they have him for another year. I'm not going to predict that to happen. I'm not sure he's even going to take another step forward because he does not have a good of a team around him now. He has less weapons, less quality of weapons, and you're not going to get coached as well. Josh Heupel has shown in the couple years now he's been at Tennessee to be a great and outstanding offensive mind and at developing quarterbacks. And you're leaving that. So he's not going to have as good as coaching. He's not going to have as good of a football mind, and he's not going to have the team around him. So I think there's a situation where he himself actually could get better talent-wise, but none of it shows because he doesn't have anything around him really. So again, it just really interesting. That'll be something to watch at least the first few weeks of the season. It could be one of those things where, okay, by week 3 or 4, they're 1-2, 0-3, 1-3, and you're like, oh, yep, okay, this is just going to be a tire fire, and we stopped caring. But I think the first couple weeks, watching UCLA and Nico Maliava could be a very interesting and entertaining watch. Then after that's the rest of the Big Ten. It's Northwestern, it's Maryland. I've heard some people talk good about Maryland this year, but am I worried about them jumping up and all of a sudden competing with teams like Ohio State and Penn State and all that? I'm not. And then you've got like the basement of the Big Ten of Purdue, and it's just like, wow, we really don't expect anything from you. We'll give you a pat on the back even if you just get a win. So that's my breakdown of the Big Ten. I don't know if I actually said it or not. I'll take Penn State to win the Big Ten. Again, I'm really hesitant to do that because they have a history of not winning the big game. But they return so much talent, so much cohesiveness, and they legitimately could end up having the best offensive line and the best defensive line in college football. And I always look at the trenches. Like, I don't care what kind of running back you have. If you got an offensive line that can move everybody, they're going to be able to run the ball at least decent, And if you got a defensive line that can stop the run, you're going to make teams throw when they don't want to throw. And if you've got a kind of great defensive line where you don't have to blitz, that's when it gets really great. When you don't have to blitz, when you can just rush 4 and get to the quarterback, and then you can, drop 7, that's when it gets really, outstanding because quarterback's getting pressure, guys coming down on him, and he doesn't have anywhere to throw because everyone's covered. So, and that could be the case for Penn State this year. I'm just really worried about that skill position. I'm really worried. I still don't see that great wide receiver there that, is someone they can throw to when they need to. And look, again, just because Drew Allar was coming back, Drew Allar was a 5-star guy. You're expecting that, great type of player. You're expecting that A to A+ type of player, Heisman contender, things like that. So far, what we've gotten is that B to B+ type guy. Just because he's coming back for another year does not guarantee that. Just because you're coming back for another year does not guarantee all of a sudden you make a 20% jump and oh Lord, look at him now. He's just running away with everything. That's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed at all. So, but because of the experience returning and because Ohio State and Oregon are both trotting out brand new quarterbacks and Michigan is trotting out a brand new quarterback and they are not, I will go with Penn State to win the Big Ten, probably beating Ohio State or Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. But I am doing that under a lot of hesitation because again, you have a hard time trusting it. And I could be sitting here middle of the season and Julian Sayin is just whipping the ball all over the place, and Dante Moore is just whipping the ball all over the place, and Penn State continues to have its usual struggles where the wide receivers are doing absolutely nothing. And I'm going, yeah, that wasn't a good decision. That was dumb. That was bad. Not a good choice. But I'm stuck with it. So I'll go with the crowd on this one, and I will take Penn State to win the Big Ten this year. All right, now break down Ohio State, Texas. Week 1 game, one of the biggest games of the year. Really wish Ohio State would have been second in the AP poll just so you could have that 1-2, and then you could market that as the biggest game of the year. Because 1-2 doesn't happen very often. I really don't know who's going to win this game. I've got no clue as to who's going to win this game because when you look at the quarterbacks, both have all the talent in the world, but both have not really gotten that much playing time. Arch Manning still has more playing time than Julian Sayin. He's got to start, I think, 2 games last year, so he does have that. Now, granted, the 2 starts were against nobodies while Quinn got healthy, but it's still not like he has a wealth of experience. But then you go to, well, he's been in Texas's system for 2 years. Julian's been in Ohio State's for 1. I have questions about Texas's O-line, but I have questions about Ohio State's defensive line. They both could be adequate or just average, to which then the offense and defensive line could be a very interesting battle between these two teams, but not because either one is necessarily unbelievably great, because they're both pretty mediocre, And then when you look at the Ohio State offensive line and Texas's defensive line, I think Texas has the edge there with Colin Simmons, but that Ohio State offensive line for the first time in like 4 or 5 years is something I'm not worried about. When you talk to an Ohio State fan over the last 4, which I'm from Columbus, Ohio, so just get that out the way. But if you're an Ohio State fan over the last 4 or 5 years and you look at that offensive line, that's usually one of your biggest worries. It's actually, I have a surprising calm about the offensive line this year. It returns a lot of experience, that they've been talking about. I always mess up his last name, so I won't even try it. But the Austin guy, that's kind of jumped around a lot of different spots on the offensive line. He's going to start at right tackle. Ryan Day said early on, like in spring ball, that he was going to be a starter. So they must be really impressed with him. Connor Hinsman, he was the starting center 2 years ago, lost his spot, got it back with injuries when injuries happened last year and performed really well. He's expected to be the starting center this year. He performed great late in the year last year and in the playoffs. So you should have confidence that he's going to perform well again. Luke Montgomery. Luke Montgomery was like the highest recruit that the current offensive line coach now is Tyler Bowen. I've already forgotten the past offensive line coach's name, but Luke Montgomery was like his best recruit. He was his biggest recruit. And he kind of kept sitting there, and you hadn't heard his name, and you were like, oh, is he a bust? Is he a guy that just like a CJ Hicks where he just maybe didn't quite live up to that potential? Even he wasn't a 5-star even, but he was a very highly rated, highly coveted 4-star guy. Well, he finally got his chance, like Connor Hinsman, because of injury, and he just balled out. He did a great job. I remember, I think it was the Tennessee game. They did a run play and they did a They did a run in between the tackles right up the middle, and he just flat out pancaked, his assignment. He flat out pancaked him. I remember that. So I have all confidence that he's going to play well, and then they brought in the Minnesota transfer, and they brought in the transfer from Rice. That's the surprising thing about Ohio State's offensive line this year. I'm not even going to try his last name. The Eric guy, I believe is his first name. The Eric guy from Rice that they brought in. I remember reading when it broke, he'd only given up like 1 sack in 3 years at Rice. And a lot of people expected, like, oh, that's your starting left tackle. And then you heard good things in camp and so forth. You're like, oh, yeah, he's going to be the guy. Well, now you're kind of hearing, like, no, he's not. Austin's moving to right tackle, which is a surprise because he had pretty much just played guard. So he's bouncing, but now he's bouncing around everywhere, and he's going to be the right tackle. And the guy from Minnesota, Philip something, is looking like he's going to win the left tackle job. And so now, I saw the other day, I think it was Letterman Rowe from Ohio State, that they spent $1 million on getting Eric from Rice. And because he's just a huge human being. He's a refrigerator with legs. It's ridiculous how just monstrous he is. But it looks like you just now have a really expensive backup. But at the same time, it's like, oh, you have a really expensive backup. And on one hand, no, that's not good because you probably wasted some NIL money there. But at the other hand, you have depth. Last year you were very uncertain if you had depth at the offensive line. This year you're kind of like, no, they have depth on the offensive line. They have guys that can come in and fill in. They have guys that can move around and play different positions. So I have kind of a calm about the Ohio State offensive line, but I'll still give the edge to Texas's D line with Colin Simmons. But then let's flip to the secondary. I'll probably give that edge to Ohio State secondary over Texas's wide receivers. When you have a guy like Caleb Downs just stalking the grounds back there, and Ohio State secondary blends really well with a lot of young guys with a lot of great talent, with experienced guys who have been there. You got a guy like Caleb Downs who only had been there a year, but he's a junior now this year. But then you also got a guy like guys like Bryce West and Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez, all first or second year guys, all didn't see the field that much last year. But again, from what we know, all the potential and talent in the world. And then you got a guy like Jeremiah Matthews, who's been there for a couple of years, played well. And then you got Lorenzo Styles Jr. He's been there for a couple of years, played well. So it's just one of those things where, like, they have a lot of talent in that secondary. That secondary is going to be the strength of that defense. Again, a lot of young, talented guys paired with experienced college veterans who in themselves are very talented, and then got a guy like Caleb Downs just stalking the grounds back there. So I'll give the Ohio State secondary the up against Texas's wide receivers. Ryan Wingo probably going to be Texas's number one wide receiver, but the fact that that's even still a question is like, well, we don't know. We got to see him step up. Like true freshman last year, I looked this up. He had just under 500 receiving yards, I believe, on the year. So, it's not like a Jeremiah Smith kind of situation. Now, Texas's wide receiver room last year was absolutely loaded, but so was Ohio State's. So, Jeremiah Smith is an alien. Ryan Wingo, I'm sure, is a very good player, but not on that Jeremiah Smith level. So you're also still sitting here thinking, will he take that next step now? You're hearing very good things from Texas's camp, but those are coming from coaches. No coach is going to, walk to the podium in fall camp or spring camp and go, oh yeah, he's playing like crap. I don't know why we have him here. Even if he is, they're not going to say it. They'll say, got to improve on some things, but we like what we see. That's stuff they're going to say. It's coach speak. So I'm not just just because the coaches say they really like what Ryan Wingo's doing, I'm not just gonna, jump up in the air and go, oh, well then it's already settled. He's the guy. I did the same thing with Jeremiah Smith last year. We kept hearing all these great things out of camp from Ohio State about how Jeremiah Smith's just on another planet, and I still was, like, okay, but let's slow down just a little bit. Let's not just make him the best player in the world already. I didn't even think he'd get over 1,000 receiving yards just because he's a true freshman. And, even Marvin Harrison didn't get that amount of playing time that early on. Neither did Cardinal Tate. No, neither did Chris Olave. But again, he's just a different freaking breed. So because of just not completely sure about that Texas wide receiver room. Again, I still expect Ryan Wingo to be that wide receiver one, and I still expect him to do well, but is he going to take that next step to where he's just freaking great? So I'll give Ohio State's secondary with that blend of talent and experience. I'll give them the edge. So I'm giving Texas the edge on the deal in the trenches on the line, but I think Ohio State has the edge in the skill position as far as secondary and wide receivers go. And then you flip that, and you flip the side of the ball. Ohio State wide receivers versus Texas wide receiver versus Texas' secondary. Again, we have Jeremiah Smith. Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith, and no one else does, and he's a freaking alien. And then you have Carnell Tate, who would be the featured wide receiver at most other schools, 90% of them. And then Brandon Innesis, a really talented guy who's been waiting his turn. 5-star guy in Quincy Porter coming in this year. just it keeps going and going and going, and it's just absolutely freaking ridiculous the amount of talent they have in the wide receiver room. So, I don't care who the team is, the Ohio State wide receivers always have the edge over the secondary. And then, I already went over Ohio State's O-line versus Texas' D-line. I'll give Texas the nod there. So there we are again. Ohio State, I'm giving the Ohio State the edge when it comes to wide receivers versus secondary, but I'll give Texas the edge when it comes to their D-line versus the Ohio State O-line. So it's really hard to pick this game. I'll give Texas the edge in quarterback as well with Arch Manning. Again, just from the fact that he has had more experience in the college world. He's been in his system 1 year longer than Julian has been in his system. So I'll give them the edge at the quarterback position as well. But it's in Columbus, and so I think that's worth some points. So again, it's a really hard game to pick. And I keep racking my brain, and I keep going back and forth on it, and back and forth on it, and back and forth on it. And again, I won't beat around the bush. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I'm an Ohio State fan. Nothing would make me happier than to see Ohio State walk out there and just beat the brakes off of them. But trying to stay impartial, you look at the whole thing. I will give the edge probably to Texas. I'll say Texas 24-20. I will go with the score being 24-20 no matter what happens. I'm just going to pick Texas to be on the winning end of it. I think, again, I'm giving Texas's D-line that edge over Ohio State's offensive line. Well, if Texas's D-line or the Texas defense can continually get pressure on Julian Sayin being his first ever start, it could get to him. It could overwhelm him a little bit. It could force him to make some mistakes, make some throws he shouldn't make. Fumble a ball, not throw the ball away and take the sack. Just a little bit of uncertainty there. And it's not like Texas's secondary is going to be bad. They shut down Jeremiah Smith last year, held him to one catch. The other guys had to pick up the slack. There's no guarantee Jeremiah will just go. Well, all of a sudden that will change, and Jeremiah will just, beat the brakes off of him this year. So Ohio State, Texas, I will give the edge to Texas 24-20. They get the win. Arch Manning performs well. But Julian Sayin performs good, and, Ohio State fans still have plenty of confidence in him. Texas just gets the edge. That's what I'll go with. All right, we'll switch gears NFL. Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. You know, Jerry was Jerry was asked. I don't know if I saw a clip. I don't know if he was on one of the shows. I don't know if it was from today or a few days ago or even last week, but they asked him about, what's the situation with Micah's contract? How did that whole thing, come about that we've gotten to this point? And Jerry said, basically, him and Micah sat down. They agreed on a number as far as money goes. They agreed on a number of years. They agreed on guaranteed money, all that stuff. They sent it to Micah's agent, and Micah's agent told Micah, no, you're not signing that deal. That's a crap deal. We can get a whole lot more. And then Micah said, oh, okay. And then it got left off there. And as kind of the feel you got from when Jerry was asked those questions was they haven't really talked about it since. And I think both parties really messed up here. Jerry just being Jerry. Jerry has lost the ability, I feel like, to negotiate contracts every single time. Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Michael Parsons. It just goes on and on and on and on. And guess what? He always pays. He doesn't ever hold out. He always pays. And the player usually ends up getting more than he would have originally if Jerry had just paid him earlier. Dak Prescott is a great example of that. If you just paid him earlier, you're probably not going to have him. Dak's going to have like a cap hit of $50 million this year. Probably would have only been 30 if you hadn't spent a year and a half negotiating and all the new money came in the NFL. But it is what it is. Jerry is who he is at this point. I think Micah messed up. Now, I'm sure Jerry probably put Micah in that situation. I would not be surprised at all. Like, Jerry all of a sudden just calls him into his office one day and sits him down and says, okay, we're going to not leave this room until we figure out this deal. Because Jerry has talked about before how he hates dealing with agents. Well, sorry, dude, they're a part of the game, and a good agent like Micah's is going to tell him to tear up that deal, not sign anything. And we're going to actually negotiate with me in the room. That's what a good agent would do. So, but I also feel like Micah should have not agreed to anything in the room with Jerry in that moment. He should have said, no, I'm not talking about this at all until we get my agent involved and then we all sit down and have contract negotiations. Jerry has told this story before, but with Tony Romo. It was before one of Tony Romo's first starts. It was when Bill Parcells was still the head coach. They called Tony into Bill Parcells' office. I remember Jerry telling this story, and along with Bill Parcells and Tony Romo even. They all told the story at once. They did like an interview thing, the three of them. And Jerry pulled up his chair to Tony Romo's, and they were knee to knee, and they sat there in Bill Parcells' office right before like either a preseason game or even a regular season game, and they negotiated their contract right then and there. The agent wasn't involved at all. So this isn't the first time Jerry Jones has pulled this, and in Tony Romo's case, it worked out just fine. Tony was happy with everything. His agent was happy with everything, so it all worked out. In Micah's case, agent obviously was not and told him to shove it. And again, in Micah's case, I think Micah would have done better if he had just said, no, we're not even going to talk about this at all. I'm not going to negotiate anything without my agent. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and left the meeting. But then again, also Jerry Jones is in the wrong by basically backing him into a corner, so I just feel at this point, Jerry Jones is just so out of touch. He's just, he's talking about how he hates agents. He's making comments in the media that are just stupid. He talks about the Buckeyes being a soap opera 365 days a year, and if it's not, he'll do something to spice it up and to make it so again. And you just, as a Cowboys fan, which I am, you just roll your eyes and you just go, "Oh my Lord, when will it end?" I got to that point probably about 2 or 3 years ago, where you just you don't really believe. Like, they could go 13-3, but like, yeah, that's not going to happen though. I've gotten to that point. Like, until they win the Super Bowl, I'm not going to believe they can win the Super Bowl. I'm not going to expect them to do anything in a year until Dak Prescott really is also no longer the quarterback of that team, and until Jerry Jones steps down and gets out of the way and gives control to Steven or whoever. And that may not be any better because, Steven could just be another factory model of his father. So it may not get any better, but it definitely is not going to get better, I think, at this point with Jerry Jones under power. I think the Cowboys are in that spot now where they're just going to be spinning their wheels, and we're going to talk about them all the time and talk about them a lot, but nothing's really going to happen as far as success goes. Micah requested a trade. It could be a real request. It would not surprise me if it were a real request that he wants out of there. But it also won't surprise me if it's a tactic, like, oh, I want to trade now. I want to get out of here. And then it forces Jerry to say, oh, okay, I'll just pay you the money. Just stop. I'll just pay you the money, So it could be one of two things. If I am the Cowboys, I just trade Micah Parsons. He hasn't always shown the best attitude. There's been rumblings before. So, I would trade Micah if I were the Cowboys. I'd trade him and try to get, a lot back. Now, I also, though, wouldn't just trade him for pennies. If you don't get what you want, then you don't trade him. You have an asking price. If no one's going to meet your asking price, you hold on to him. Told me like the trade deadline when someone's really looking for, someone that can put them over that edge and get them to the Super Bowl. Because that's not going to be the Cowboys this year. The Cowboys are going to be lucky to go 500. I don't see it. So, but we'll see what happens. But with that whole drama, but that's what it is, though. It's drama, and the Cowboys have gotten to that point where that's all they are. All the Cowboys are every single year, every single week is just drama with Jerry Jones and what he says in the media about his coach or his quarterback or what they did on this play or what they did on that play and so on and so forth. So it's all there is drama. All right, switch gears. Cleveland Browns quarterback competition. We expect Joe Flacco to be the starter week 1. Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett's actually been hurt, I think, but they've gotten playing time, especially Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. Look, excuse me. I see the talent with Shedeur Sanders. That preseason game he got to start, he definitely flashed some skill. And so I can understand the hype around that. The thing that bothers me is after he gets pulled from that game and he's done for the day, Andrew Berry, the Browns GM, is on the sidelines, and he comes up to him to congratulate him on a good game, and he says, great job, take what you did today into practice tomorrow and in the next game and just keep building. Like what a lot of GMs or coaches would say. Now, most rookies or most players, just people in general, if they have that kind of compliment from their boss in any kind of line of work, 95, I would say, % of the population is going to go, thank you, appreciate it, will do. Just, give the pleasantries back, and keep on moving. He had the decency to come over and congratulate you and say good job, and so you just say thank you. Of course, Shedeur couldn't do that. Andrew said, nice job, I'm proud of you, keep going. And Shedeur's response was thank you. And then he kind of stayed silent for a second. And then it was like, you're not fully proud though, right? You're like half proud. You're kind of like half proud, right? Because and it's like kind of just, and I don't even know what to describe that response. I don't think it was sarcasm. I think it was his like true feeling, almost like, but you're not fully proud of me though, right? You're just kind of saying it, right? You're just saying you're proud, right? It's all good. You're just saying it, right? Because for the cameras or whatever. And you can see the look on Andrew's face is just kind of one of like, what? Huh? And he stops. He kind of stops him and he goes, no, I'm proud of you. Good job. Keep learning. Take what you did today. Keep going. But you can also, again, see the look on Andrew's face where it's just kind of like, what, dude? I'm just trying to give you a compliment. Why you got it? Like you're throwing it back in my face a little. Like that's a good way to say it. Shadeur's kind of throwing it back in his face a little bit, and it's just like, why can't it just be easy? Why can't it just be he comes up to you, says, great job, proud of you, keep going, and then you respond with thank you, I will, appreciate the opportunity, something like that. Why does it have to be, a remark? Why does it have to be? Why do you have to throw it back in his face a little bit and say, "Well, you're not fully proud of me, though, right? You're not fully proud of me, right? You're kind of half proud of me, And it's like, dude, why you got to make it difficult? Why you got to make it uncomfortable? You know, why can't? And it's the maturity level. That's really what it is. All the talent. But maturity, just maturity level. Why to the maturity level, literally just to say thank you. Having that maturity level, just say thank you and move on. It's not that hard, but couldn't find a way to do it in that moment. And it just baffles me, and that's the part that makes me upset. I don't really care about the speeding ticket. Myles Garrett has 6 speeding tickets now because he got one like a week ago, and he's got 6 of them now in just the past 2 years. And quite frankly, anytime he's interviewed or anything like that, you get the feeling that he's just a good guy, that he's a good guy. He just drives too fast. So, the speeding tickets, I really don't care about. Colin Cowherd, is going to lose his mind over it, but I don't care about it. It's that stuff. It's when you're in any walk of life, whether it's football or anything. If your boss takes time out of his day or whatever, or makes it a point to come up to you and say, "Great job. You did a good job. Proud of you. Keep building, keep doing what you're doing." If he has the time to do that, because a lot of bosses don't, if he does that, I feel like in that moment, just have the decency to say thank you. Complete that good moment. He's extended the olive branch. He's trying to have a good moment with you. Complete it. Finish that good moment between the two of you. And he just couldn't do it. He had to go back with, "But you're not fully proud of me, though, right? You're not fully there. You're not fully proud of me. You're not fully proud of me." And just like, why you got to make it difficult? Why you got to make it uncomfortable? Why do you have to do that? And it's that stuff that just angers me, because it's just literally so easy to say 2 words, "Thank you," and then keep going about your day. And at the end of the day, that's going to be the thing that costs Shedeur in the end, I think, is just that maturity and the cockiness and just, throwing things back in people's faces. Then it was like a couple days later or something like that. I don't know if it was a Browns press guy or some NFL press guy, and he had to make the point, because athletes read what people write, and when they end up being right, they'll talk about how they kept that receipt and they kept it for motivation and stuff like that. But I think they also understand that a guy's just doing his job, and they wanted to go and prove him wrong. But at the end of the day, it's even after they've gone and proved that right or wrong, or proved that media member wrong, it's not it's pleasant. It's a pleasant exchange, but then he had to go call out a media guy after, I think it was after that preseason game, the next day or 2 days after, one of the Browns media members or an NFL media member, there was video of that too, that was caught, and Shedeur's walking up to him and talking about, "Yeah, you didn't believe in me. You say you didn't believe in me." And the guy's just like, "Yeah, I got it, and it's just that cockiness, and it'd be one thing if you just won the NFL MVP. It'd be one thing if you just won, the Lombardi Trophy and you won the Super Bowl. You performed well in one preseason game. That's good. Take it with you. Build on it. But I don't think it also, though, then gives you the right to start walking around and go, "Oh yeah, you see, you didn't believe in me, but I'm here. I'm that guy. Can't stop me." And just, again, that cockiness and that need to, just be legendary and to show off and to do all those things. I just don't understand it, and I think it's going to be the thing that stops him from being, even a moderately good player in the NFL, and possibly stops him from having a long-term NFL career, because people just aren't going to want to deal with you. At the end of the day, people just aren't going to want to deal with you. I remember watching The Last Dance, and they were in that part of the Bulls were playing the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals in like 7 games, and all the writers picked the Cavs to win. And I can't remember what the guy's name was or which media guy was he, but you would know his face if you're like a real sports fan, real basketball fan. You would like know his face if you saw it. And he talked about before that game 7, because like one writer had the Cavs in 5 games, another had the Cavs in 6 games, and that guy that Michael that was talking in the documentary in that moment that Michael was coming to talk to had the Cavs in 7 games. And they apparently in that Cavs Bulls game 7, they were all sitting at one table. Michael, after warm-ups is over and tip-off's about to happen, walks up to that table and says, "Proved you wrong 2 days ago, proved you wrong yesterday, gonna prove you wrong tonight." Okay. But then he could still be pleasant with them when that was over. He could still be pleasant with them, and shake their hand and without giving them too much grief. Shedeur can't seem to do that. He's got to keep receipts with everybody, and he's got to go proving everybody wrong, and he's got to show it off and be cocky at all times. And it just is like, dude, just bring it down a level, having legendary all over your house before you even get drafted. It's just that feel of like the ego has just got to come down, or I think it's going to cost him possibly his whole career, or at least cost him like starting, and he's a backup for somewhere for most of his time in the NFL, because again, people just aren't going to want to deal with you. People are just not going to want to deal long term with a guy who feels the need after any little moment, any little game to come up and go, I'm that dude. I'm that dude. I proved you wrong. You saw what I did. You know what happens now. And you're just like, dude, just why? Why do you have to? Why can't just be winning be good enough? Why do you got to go flaunt in front of everybody, including your own team? Again, Andrew Berry, the Browns GM, including the guys that are on your side and trying to even compliment you in the moment. You have to go up to them and go, you sure though? Like, I don't know. I don't understand it. I think, again, he's still just got some growing up to do. He's probably the most talented quarterback in that room. No doubt. Dylan Gabriel's small. He doesn't have the arm strength Shedeur does. He doesn't have the mobility that Shedeur does. Joe Flacco's old. I loved what he did with the Browns a couple years ago. That was so fun to watch. So yeah, I'll say it right here, right now. Shedeur Sanders is the most talented quarterback in that in the Cleveland Browns room right now. Not that that's exactly hard to be the most talented quarterback in the Cleveland Browns quarterback room right now, but he is. He is the most talented quarterback in that room right now. But it's this that's going to get in the way. All right, guys, that is everything. Thank you for watching. I'm going to be dropping a lot of content as we get geared up for football season. And then after that, probably back it down just a little bit to like, a couple times a week. I'm kind of getting a feel for this and getting it figured out of, when I want to put shows out and what days I have that most time and availability to do so. But again, thank you all for watching. I appreciate it, and I will see you next time.